Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. And today we'll be looking at the Topping D70 Pro Octo. And I'd like to thank Apos Audio for loaning me this unit for evaluation. So let's jump right on in and take a look at this build quality. The first thing that's noticeable on this DAC is the beautiful screen in the front. Great colors, super sharp. It has 3 levels of dimness and it can also be defeated so you can have it completely off after about 10-15 seconds. So that would be on its auto feature. Currently I'm shooting a Bluetooth signal to it, so you'll see BT up on top. And we have a couple different display modes. That's our resolution right there. We have a VU meter and an FFT screen. A really solid front plate and a decent encoder, which you can program to do different things with the push of the button. I don't have this set up as a preamp, just strictly as a DAC. So the button feature that I have set up is to scroll through the PCM filters. I personally liked filter number 5 the best. The rest of the chassis is aluminum also, but it isn't the thickest aluminum. I wish they would have made it the same thickness as the front plate. If you press down here, you actually get a little bit of flex. And if you feel the edge here, it is a little bit thinner than I would have liked for a $600 unit. On the back side, we have our ins and outs. Over here, we have our AES EBU input, USB-B, coaxial, a toslink optical, your USB port, and your analog outputs on RCA and on XLR. They come with these really nice little silicone dust covers, which are super easy to come on and off. Sometimes companies make these super hard to get off. These are really nice. You have your power plug here. And I will say I really like the cord that this unit comes with. It's very flexible. It's not exactly super high end. It's 18 gauge rated at 300 volts, but super easy to maneuver around any entertainment system. I like the cord a lot. We have a main power toggle by the plug here. And finally our triggers. And I love the fact that they give you in and outs. I don't like it when a company just gives you a trigger in, because if you're building a separate unit, you want it to continue on to other components. And this allows you to daisy chain other devices, whether they be preamplifiers, amplifiers, or whatnot. So the in and out on the 12 volt trigger, always welcomed. This unit also comes with that standard plastic remote. Again, something I hate to see, particularly at a $600 price point. I would love Toppings and some of these other manufacturers do the same thing that ROON does, like with their Flamingo DAC, where for additional $20 they sell you an aluminum remote. This control just doesn't feel the same quality as the DAC, and I'd expect a little better. As for the output voltage on the XLRs and RCAs, there is an option to increase that voltage from the standard 2 volts on the RCA and 4 volts on the XLR to 2.4 and 5 volts respectively. A few manufacturers are adding this feature, but I would recommend that before you increase that voltage to the 2.4 or 5 volts, that you read through your user's manual on your amplifier or preamplifier to make sure it's comfortable accepting those higher input voltages. This DAC uses a Cirrus Logic chips, the CS43198s, and it uses 8 of those units. And here are my listening impressions. This DAC is very clean, tight, and very polite. Initially, I had a little bit less perceived detail because the highs seem to be rolled off, but they're actually not rolled off. They're actually just a little less sibilant than what the other DACs that I compared it to. After listening for a bit, I noticed that this DAC was quite a bit more detailed than all the other DACs that I had currently in the house. I compared the D70 Pro Octo to the SMSL SU1, the DOAC U8, and the Cambridge Audio 851N. The first thing that stood out was the reduced bass out of the Octo. It was a case of less bass quantity, but more bass quality. You get quite a bit more texture in that bass. You can hear the rumbles and vibrations in bass notes. In the vocal range, this unit was more laid back than the DOAC U8, but not quite as much as a Cambridge Audio. A very comfortable place to be. The background was darker than the other DACs I compared it to, which I believe is what allowed the detail to come out more. The soundstage width and depth was about the same as a Cambridge Audio, however with more detail, better separation of layering, and the instrument placing was more precise out of the Octo. Now I love the sound of the DOAC U8, but in comparison to the Octo, I did find that the DOAC U8 was a little bit congested. The Octo just opens up those notes, gives you a little more sense of space around the notes. The sounds just kind of bloom without adding distortion or extra reverb. The U8 was a little more aggressive, forward sounding, and a little bit brighter. Initially, I think that's what lends to giving you the impression that the U8 had a little bit more detail, but after listening through the other ranges, through the mid-range and the lows, that's when you'll clearly hear that the Octo has more detail all across. You can just hear more information that seems to be missing out of the SU1, the U8, or the Cambridge Audio. Super impressive. I have to say, out of the DACs that I've listened to, this here is my new favorite. I love the sound. I love how it softens up that top edge, the amount of detail that's present, and how it projects that sound while keeping a relaxed vibe. For TV watching, This DAC is awesome as well, super enjoyable, vocals are super crisp, and the background sounds beautiful. As I mentioned earlier, the bass frequencies is where this DAC can sound a little bit thin. But because this guy is so neutral and so precise, you can always add on an EQ to this unit. In my opinion, a great option would be to pair the Octo with the shit Lokius here. Because the bass is super precise on the DAC, adding a little bass with an EQ is gonna just give you that little extra thickness and fill up those areas that you might feel lacking. And if you want a little more shimmer up on top, of course the top frequency can help you with that. I personally wouldn't touch any of the middle frequencies as the mid-range sounds beautiful. If you have a DAC that has a little more bass, like the SU1 or the Duke U8, you can always bring the bass down with an EQ, but you're not gonna make it any tighter. At this point, you have a super tight, super fast bass, and you can make it thicker while still retaining that bass quality. So the Topping D70 Pro Octo is a wonderful buy for anybody who's building a separate system, is looking to upgrade an older DAC, or for somebody stepping their foot into the high-end DAC world. Highly recommended. I love the sound of this, and I have to say I 100% agree with Serb over at Is It Worth It. His listening impressions of what he heard were exactly what I heard out of this DAC in my system here. I know Tharbammer's review wasn't as favorable. I think he found it to be a little bit bright. I personally didn't get any of that brightness in my system. Maybe his setup brought out more of that brightness, but it's an easy fix with an EQ. He had noted that he found it to be a little boring. I wouldn't call it boring as much as relaxed. It's personally a sound that I love. Alright guys, so on part 2 of this video, I'll have some audio samples. Again, those samples aren't really to hear the sound quality, as I believe it's a little bit tougher through YouTube, but at least you can hear the differences between the DACs. You'll hear the slight differences. You'll notice that this one does roll off a little bit at the top end, but listen for the detail because the detail is definitely there on the Octo versus the SU1 and the U8. But for $600, it should be. I'll leave a link below to Apos Audio's website in case this is on your shortlist. Once again, highly recommended. See you on the next one.